You were there too in New Orleans the day that they beat the Saints in the playoffs last year, and it was a stunning upset and an incredible performance by them. But then the next week they end up in San Francisco. You can't win too many of those games in a row, those road playoff games. But yeah, they've been able to keep the defense pretty well together. I'm not sure how much longer that lasts. They believe in Mike Zimmer, and obviously extending his contract proves that.
And it's time for Purple Daily. I'm Zolgad. Courtney Cronin, ESPN, who covers the Vikings, as always, on Friday, joins us. Declan Goff producing. And Courtney, let's start off there.
Yeah.
Zim gets a 3-year contract extension that we find out about this week. It's yet to be announced officially by the team.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my starting point for you. Why do you think it took so long? Like, do you think there was a decision being made here? Do you think that it was always sort of a formality that was going to happen? What's your personal belief on why this took until just before training camp was scheduled to start?
Well, I mean, typically we've seen these things with the Vikings go right up until training camp. So that's one theory. I think a global pandemic probably has something to do with that too, just with league business getting pushed back, and why we haven't heard anything about a contract extension for Dalvin Cook and why they've honestly been slow playing so much. But those are two things. But I also think that just from what I know, I remember starting a report on this back in January when I heard like kind of what was being brought to the table from the Zimmer camp of like wanting a multi-year extension. Yes, he got it, but like the number I had heard was a 4-year extension that was initially proposed, which would take him by time, I think he'd be about 68 when he finishes that, and he wants to coach until he's about 70. So obviously what we know now is that it's, likely a 3-year extension, and that takes until he's 67 years old. I mean, that's, potentially this could be where he rides out the rest of his career if he wins a championship and where he retires eventually. So I think it probably just like in terms of like, the length and all of that, and, ownership really needing to figure out if this was the direction that they wanted to go. I don't think this was as simple as saying, yep, great season 2019, let's follow it, right? Let's run it back in 2020. I think they really had to think about the direction that they were going here, because like we've reported, there were people in that building who would have been, happy seeing Kevin Stefanski take over the role as head coach and keeping the Kubiak system in place on offense and seeing a change. And there's other people in that building who are staunch Zimmer believers. And I think that there was a little bit of, I wouldn't say friction, but I think there's definitely some, divide in opinion just on the direction of the team. But, at the end of the day, the Wolves say we want more of the same, and more of the same in their mind is going to take them to win a Super Bowl. They bought this team, more than 15 years ago now in 2006, and, they haven't won a Lombardi trophy yet. And I know there are a lot of people who say, well, Zim's been here for, this is the 7th season, like now or never. Well, it took Andy Reid 21 years to win a Super Bowl. I'm just saying it's not something.
And two places, you're right.
Yes, and it's hard. Like Mike won a Super Bowl in Dallas in '95, and I remember when we were talking to him during the week leading into the NFC Championship game, like he told his players, just, you don't realize how hard it is to get back here. Every year, it is so difficult. So I mean, I think that it could happen within the length of this contract. I'm not sure, but they definitely gave him at least the flexibility of time to figure it out, because you're in a situation now with a roster revamp and having. Like if he would have gotten a 1-year extension, Judd, that would have, or like basically what he got the last time around when they picked up his option through 2020. For somebody like that who kind of can bring a little bit of leverage to the table and say, hey, the 3rd winningest coach in franchise history, took you to the playoffs last year, I've taken you to the playoffs 3 times in 6 years. You gotta give me a little bit more than a year to make this thing happen.
Is Rick Spileman next now?
I think so.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I mean, and everybody I've spoken with said that they anticipate it happening, and that if indeed it does happen, which we all kind of expect, that it would be linked up with Zimmer, just because that's the way it's been since Zimmer arrived in 2014. And like it or not, for both of them, they are linked to each other for the rest of their careers. They've built something here in Minnesota. They want to see it through. They've made some really tough and really franchise-altering decisions here. With bringing Kirk Cousins in. I mean, they will be linked to him forever. But like we said, if it's a 3-year extension, like we all believe it is, Zimmer's contract goes beyond when Kirk Cousins' contract does. So that's a really important thing to note there. And Spielman, if they line him up, could be the same. So where they, if this doesn't work out with Kirk Cousins over the next few years, they can try one more time before the leash is probably run out.
Okay, you just opened up the Pandora's box that I absolutely love. All right, So I mean, this is the intrigue, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Zimmer is 64.
Yeah.
He's now got a contract essentially through his age 67, I
Yeah.
believe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Birthday's in the spring.
Spielman's probably done contract wise, or it's going to get done. But the fly in the ointment of Cousins. What do you think the Vikings are thinking here as far as that goes? Because let's say it doesn't work. And let's not say he's bad. Let's just say it doesn't work. You don't win a Super Bowl. And Mike's still saying, hey, I'm 67, 68, blah, blah, blah. I can win a Super Bowl. Courtney, what do you do quarterback wise here? Because, if this is going to be Mike, he's going to tell at that point in time, if Mike is still here, he's going to tell the Wills and he's going to tell Rick, go get me a quarterback quickly. Like, go get me the Brett Favre of right now. Right. But the reality of is if this doesn't work, there's a very good case to be made that you want to build your quarterback position by going to find one long term. Perhaps you have a bad year and get a high draft pick. Mm-hmm. What's the intrigue of the conversation and the potential palace coup at TCO Performance Center going to be like at that point? Because I could see very differing sides and real disagreements about how you fill the quarterback position post Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I mean, do you go and get Aaron Rodgers? Like after 2022?
I'm sorry. What did you just say?
I know. I just pulled a Zolgad. You go get Aaron Rodgers in 2023, and you try to do what you did in 2009 with Brett Favre. I mean, that's an option, but I think that there are going to be people who would look at that saying, "Hey, it's now or never," because by that point, Adam Thielen is 33, 34 years old. You've got, probably Justin Jefferson just about entering, his prime, but, where's Danielle Hunter at in his career? Where's, where your cornerback group, is Harrison Smith still playing at that point? Like there's so much there that is unknown that, I think if you are in a full rebuild or if you are conceding at that point, then everybody's probably not going to be around for much longer anyways. But if the quarterback still is what you believe is the missing piece, I think you go with a veteran on the market. And, hell, maybe that's Dak Prescott at that point. Who knows? Like maybe it's Dak, maybe it's Aaron Rodgers, maybe it's Russell Wilson, because a lot of those guys come due 2023 in free agency. It's a great year for quarterbacks. So intriguing to say the least, but if they're not on the same page, then that's going to be a problem because it took them a while to get on the same page about Kirk Cousins initially.
Yeah. What's your sense currently right now of the feeling in that building as far as Mike goes? Like how much do we think now with the loss in the playoffs several months behind us at this point, Courtney, how much do you think there is a feeling that Mike is the right guy versus the people that don't? Because to your point, there were definitely people after that playoff loss who said Stefanski would be great, but I just don't think that Mike is the right fit in 2020. And then, of course, there's the whole conversation about coaching shelf lives and has his message gotten old. What's your current thought from people you talk to about how many pro-Zimmer people there are in Eagan?
Well, I think it's probably still split because I do think that there were people who were wanting to see Stefanski, who's a homegrown talent, and see an offense. It kind of felt like last year was the first time the offense was ever in the spotlight, and for good reason. And Zimmer's very adamant that they're going to still win with defense. And that's hard to do in today's league. I'm not saying he can't do it. I think he certainly can. But I think that there are people who are ready to see those tides turn to where instead of going against the grain, they're going, with more of what the NFL is doing currently. But, fortunately for Zimmer, he found a marriage with Gary Kubiak that Gary believes in what Mike believes in. Gary's a Super Bowl winning coach. Gary has made Mike a better coach. And I think that there are a lot of people who think that this marriage is what is going to take them to the promised land because Gary's in charge of the offense. Mike doesn't have to worry about it. He doesn't have to, it's the first time ever that he hasn't made comments or, been frustrated with his offensive coordinator. Kubiak has been, probably the best thing to happen to Mike at this part of his career. And I think that people think it's kind of almost like a joint thing too. Like it'll be good for the overall health. It's not that, it's not that anybody doubts his defenses are good, but it's always it's always been, well, can you win, can your offense bail your defense out if it needs it? And, I think he finally found a spot where he has a trusted voice and somebody that he really believes in to make that happen if it needs to.
So Mike believes that Gary can be successful and win. How much do you think that Mike believes that Kirk can? And now I get the point that there is a guy now between Mike and Kirk, and so
That's important.
Gary is sort of the parent then, right? Or the parent that likes Kirk, and so he takes care of Kirk. But do you think that Mike has convinced himself that Kirk can not just be good, because statistically, again, for the 1,000th time, Kirk Cousins statistically is good. Do you think that Mike in his heart believes that Kirk Cousins can be the guy who helps hoist Mike and Gary off the field after the last game in Tampa this season? And I'm not talking about the game against Brady and the Buccaneers.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know, to be honest with you. I think that it's not just as simple as like, yes, he believes in it because he's here. He wants to be here long term. I think that, I don't ever think Kirk was his first choice. I mean, he wanted Teddy. When they were going through all those quarterbacks in that offseason meeting in February 2018, he wanted Teddy, and the medical, what they were hearing just didn't match up. So I don't know if Kirk's ever truly been his guy, but he can get behind it if it works. And it's like, he wants to run the ball. So Dalvin Cook's his guy too. I'm sure that if Mike Zimmer were in charge of the contracts and, for players, he would have already signed Dalvin Cook to an extension to make this whole thing work. But I don't know if I think that it sounds so crass, but it's not that he just like tolerates Kirk, but find me a better adjective.
I think he tolerates quarterbacks. No, I think you're right.
Yeah,
I think he does.
I don't know if that's the right word, but that's kind of how it feels.
No, I think you're right. I think he tolerates beyond his guy, and Teddy was his guy, no questions. Beyond his guy, Courtney, I think that's the perfect word though. I think he sees, and this might be the problem. I think that Mike Zimmer sees quarterbacks as the necessary evil to success while really wanting to believe that it's the defense. And I think there was probably a time, right? There was probably a time in this league where you could say, I can get behind that. Now, it's not perfect, but I can do it. My doubt is in 2020, if you can do that. And look, Case Keenum, for the most part, in 17, gave Mike a season from God, right? An absolute gift. Like you watch that and you're like, I cannot believe this. And I think most coaches would have shaken their heads and been like, this is great. Look at what Case is doing, right? Mm-hmm. And Mike never enjoyed it.
No, he never fully bought in either. I think it felt like luck every single week, and it was.
But I think your word is right. I think he tolerates it. And I guess my question, big picture right now is, can you be a successful coach in this league while tolerating a position that is of the utmost importance, not just sort of important? It might be the most important in all sports.
Yeah. You got to buy into it, right? Or you have to at least have somebody who's over on the other side of the ball, i.e. a Gary Kubiak, that you trust to get the most out of that position. Like if you are not fully bought into it, and there are definitely, us against them type mentality. I mean, I've heard from people within the organization in years past that's sometimes when things are not great, that's how it becomes an us against them, a defense versus offense. And I'm not saying it's always like that, but like when the going gets tough, you kind of figure out like who's in your corner. And, with quarterback play, when things are good, I think that Mike is, very complimentary of Kirk and, very proud of Kirk for what he's done. I mean, you think about that stretch of 4 games there in October, albeit against like the Giants, Lions, and Redskins, the Washington football team. But like,
and that's what you shall call them for 2020. The Washington, the It's.
But yeah, I mean, like he, tolerating quarterback play, it doesn't sound like the right thing to do, right? It's the most important position in all of sports, but if it can get you by, and if you can rely on your bread and butter, which they are going to try to win with defense, that is what this is proclaimed. I mean, he's had, they finished top 5 in scoring defense, 2 years in the last 5. They were number 1 in 2017. Like they've been no lower than 9th since 2015. Like that's a pretty good mark too. Like that's the one that you want to kind of judge how good the defense actually is. That unit is so strong. And even with all this turnover, he now has the luxury of time to rebuild it and blow it up in places that he didn't like it, like the secondary and the cornerbacks, to say, hey, we can still do it my way as long as the quarterback can hold up his end.
So what, I believe it's 5 defensive starters from 2019 are gone. 9 guys, right?
9 guys
from
total.
That side of the ball.
Yep.
Okay. Take me down this path then. With no OTAs, mini camps, training camp's going to be incredibly weird.
Yeah.
Right now, probably no preseason games. privately. So if you pumped him full of wine and truth serum, and Mike came clean and sat down and said, Courtney, I'm going to be truthful as I could possibly be, which ordinarily I wouldn't be. What do you think he thinks about the chances of this defense being really good from day one? Because I'm not saying they can't be good, and I'm not saying they're destined to fail, but my God, if I can't get my guys on the field, basically, and that's my bread and butter. And by the way, cornerbacks are my favorite thing, and these guys are not going to have experience aside from a guy like Mike Hughes or some Holton Hill. What do you think he thinks of this defense right now?
I think you could argue, I guess if you're looking at it from like a glass half full approach, they've been here before. So they came in 2014, they took over the league's worst defense, and by middle of the season, the defense wasn't so bad. And it was probably actually the strength of that team. You can look at it from that perspective, but I also think that Mike's a realist and says, especially with a contract, I need time to make this thing work. So, therefore you're not going to turn around a past defense that, I think they're 15th last year. I mean, they struggled. And a lot of that, is because he had to take away Xavier Rhodes. You had to take away Trey Waynes. You had to start over at those two positions. And now you have a really young core of cornerbacks where we know in previous years, cornerback development doesn't typically happen until about year 3 in the NFL, at least in Mike Zimmer's defense.
Yes.
Same for the last two guys that I mentioned. Mackenzie Alexander was one of those guys too. Mike Hughes was the anomaly. Like, he looked really good as a rookie. I'm curious, we'll never know what that would have been, but I think that Zim realizes there have been several all-in type moves made with this franchise. Obviously, his contract is an all-in type move. Kirk's contract extension was an all-in type move. But then you have to dial that back and say, okay, while those are happening, we still have a roster revamp going on with the entire defense right now. And you have to be realistic to think you can't, if you win this year, if you go 10-6, you make the playoffs, whatever, it's kind of gravy on top of everything else, because you have to win in 2021. You are built for the future. I mean, take a look at what they did with their draft class this year. Like, everything that they're doing right now is building for 2021 and beyond. So he's kind of built this and walked it back to show you, hey, the expectations are not nearly as high as they could have been in 2020. And therefore the pressure to win this year is kind of off them.
And I think in some ways, if you're Mike, I think the pandemic might be a break because of what you just said too, because now you can go in and make a very good case to your bosses to what you just said. If I make the playoffs in 20, I'm really damn good.
Yeah.
But 21 and 22, we go back up. And so, because if the pandemic does not hit, right, guys are still gone. Like, Rhodes is still gone, and Waynes is probably still gone. And then I think there's an inherent pressure that after the OTAs, camps, blah, 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 that you step in 2020 and the new guys hit the ground running. And that, if there's not immediate success, it's like, well, why not? Now you could say we had no time. So I think if you're Zim, the pandemic almost helps your case to say 2020 is gravy and 2021 will be back.
Yeah, I think I think
you're right.
That's perfectly it. I mean, he bought himself time, and a lot of coaches don't get that luxury of time. Like, you may get a 2-year extension, 1-and-1 essentially, if they have one that has your option. But I think 3 years for him is exactly what he needs to get this thing done. And if he can't get it done in that time frame, then maybe it's time to move on at that point. But he now has the benefit of not having to go all in and go nuts this year, and the pressure being on them, and just having to rely on so many rookies. I mean, it's not just Jeff Gladney. It's, it's Justin Jefferson, does Ezra Cleveland have to play? Does Cam Dantzler have to play? Are you relying on, James Lynch to take over a 3-technique spot as a rookie? And he's kind of undersized and he's never played that spot. Like, I mean, it's just so much uncertainty, but they are built for the future, which is why his contract, I think, reflects that too.
Great stuff. Purple Daily is the show. She's Courtney Cronin. I'm Zolgad. Declan Goff producing. We will talk to you soon as the Vikings, at least we think, are about to start training camp.